we're back with the debate. I think we're having the inter-team discussion.
Yeah.
Do you want to resume that?
Okay, so
We're in short time. Should we just move on to the open floor?
let's finish the discussion.
So the proposition mentioned it being unfair that the upper classes benefit a lot from state infrastructure, so they have to pay more and get back for that. But these people already pay a proportion of their wealth, which in absolute terms is much less of the less people. Why would it be fair to double dip them and have them pay more progressively?
I certainly didn't say that it's unfair. No, it's absolutely fair to use the infrastructure and the facilities provided by the government. I simply said that they should be more obliged. They should feel more obliged to give back something in return for this. And let me restate that proportionate does not necessarily mean fair. And it is ultimately the role of the state is to redistribution the wealth in such a way that the country can function, and also its citizens are happy. It's up to the government to decide on the most favorable model to this.
You mentioned that it would be the moral thing to do, so the role of the state is then to impose morality on these people.
The role of the state is to create fairness and social cohesion.
I'm not entirely convinced you understand what tax means in terms of 50% tax effectively on your daily life means that every second day of your life you work for somebody else. So on a given week, the 5 days, 2.5 days you work for yourself, 2.5 days you work for the government. And what the big problem with that is, in most cases, one, you have very little control over the government because, I mean, let's face it, democracy, even though the reality is you involved, what is the actual control that you can impose on that government the way they spend money? They are the policymakers that can change everything every 3 4 years, you have no control of that. And it's very difficult to exercise any control on a day-to-day basis. Secondly, the government doesn't really care how they spend their money because they're not their money. So what the government does is spend other people's money. So if they do it wrongly, they can no liability. They distribute the money in foreign investments, no liability. It's not their money. So the reality is that what the problem with taxes, I agree that there should be an equal society. My problem with such a system is that I think it deprives people from the moral obligation to give and I think there needs to be some sort of balance between people voluntarily giving part of their salaries, which are not paid by the government, addressing such issues the way they want it to be. So I, for example, am happy to contribute if I have to redistribute % of my salary. I'm happy to redistribute a very big portion of it to education and research because I believe that. I'm unhappy to distribute it for the military because I don't believe that. And I'm unhappy to distribute it for welfare benefits because I don't believe in people working. So, and I don't take that choice. The government makes that choice for me. And however I vote, that's the government's decision. And that's what I don't like about taxation because effectively the 50% tax that I pay, more than half of it, or like the biggest by far the biggest portion goes to people not working. And I just don't believe in that. And I think the moral obligation and the governmental taxation do not align.
That case, why is there in this country?
For now, I am, because there are opportunities, and the reality is that, of course, there are opportunities for work, we have opportunities to learn. I haven't said that necessarily I'm going to stay here forever, and I think probably taxation is going to be a very big factor at some point, and what I'm getting out of the political life that I'm getting. At the moment, I'm learning, and I think there's a lot to learn for financial services here. And wherever we go in that case, it's interesting there. I think that's probably not simply the United Kingdom. It's the problem of all the developed countries, because it's consensus has been set up between in the between those capitalist societies, the United States and Kingdom, and Western Europe, that's what happens. And so everywhere I go where with those currencies, it's going to be a similar situation. So when you say where is in that country, what's the alternative? You can go back, you can go to the Emirates where there's no tax, which maybe I will explore one day. But if you want to work in, the quality of work that you're getting in the industry, then you can be in ordinary or in potentially Hong Kong, but
You can also work in financial services in the Emirates. However, you have chosen to work here because the government has used taxes to create the opportunities which you explore now, right?
incorrect. The government, the way that the financial services sector is developed is in spite of the government's effort, do everything they can to get rid of it by their actions, including what they're doing in the European Union and what they're doing on regulation, what they're doing on just the whole financial services sector, the way that there are concepts in the financial services industry here that don't exist in these countries, such as the verification prospectuses and the due diligence reports, which defines the United States. And in spite of all the government efforts to do everything they can to get rid of our business is still here for historical reasons. And we can go back to the British Empire, we can go back to the way that this developed between the links with the United States and everything. And it's not so easy to shift this and reality is that trading industry does not suffer from as much from being here than people work for them because of the tax treatment of their profits in many cases. And most of the companies I work for are ultimately not registered in the United Kingdom, except a few public listed companies, which of course, because of the capital markets in the country incorporated, just basically a capital development. That's what it is. I don't think it's because the British government is did a miraculous job in maintaining the financial services industry. It's basically being open to it, and it's the English-speaking world that's very crucial because the English-speaking world is dominating. And so the English-speaking financial services center is dominating New York, London, Hong Kong, and that's another part of the reason. And that's I don't think that it's to do with the government.
The rooted discussion on financial sector in the UK, but maybe we should switch the focus to and open the floor to questions from the audience and invite discussion to the key point to be supportive of progressive taxes and whatnot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would want some clarifications. First on the promotion side. It is very unclear to me what wealth tax we were supposed to get as. He asked this, he has cut short, but I mean, just nothing how you do it, but what does it really mean? I understand what income tax is, I don't understand what wealth tax is.
Right, so what I mean by wealth tax is tax on all the wealth of the capital an individual has, without property, assets, or bank accounts or anything like this. Essentially, wealth is wealth and capital is what makes and keeps the very rich very rich. It's not their income. It's how they invest their money and the rate of return they get from that.
Does that mean, for instance, that we should be considering between VAT rate, for instance? Or I'm not entirely sure how you would actually levy a tax on this. Not the value or particular. When would you collect this? Or do you think you're rich, you pay 50% VAT, you pay 9%? Or not quite sure how you would value someone's capital, and then when we just break into a house.
I'm not saying you pay my VAT. What I'm saying is if you have a high capital, you pay a higher percentage of that as a tax.
So if that is in addition to all the other taxes that you have to pay for the state?
Yeah.
If I can help clarify your point, for example, tax on property is a type of tax on wealth, because It's only when you have the assets you pay that tax.
Yes, but what I'm saying is that this should also be progressing up. If your property is more valuable, you should pay a higher percentage. Tax.
All right, so essentially, property tax would be an instance of this. What you mean by
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
Well,
I was struggling to find a real life counterpart.
Yes, well, I said wealth. I said I include property in that, but it could be a load of things. But it would be an example. Let's say property tax is a type of wealth tax.
All right, and that's good. I wanted to understand what it was about. Second point, question again for pro side. You know the ever handing point when it comes to debating progressive or regressive taxation systems, flat tax, whatever it is however, how does talent cope with this, and how do you maintain talent in the country? We are aware all of us about the brain drain, and that happens with countries, most countries that have this progressive taxation system. So how, I mean, that's obviously, as far as I'm concerned, it's one of the very strong arguments against this taxation system. Is it really that?
I believe, like I said in my arguments, that income and wealth is not the only thing you ideally want from living in a country, and it is upon the government to create incentives for talented people to remain in this country. I'll give you, for example, Switzerland, where there is a very high level of tax, and yet it has one of the highest satisfaction of quality of life.
So how is that achieved? I mean, generally speaking, I mean, if you tax people, how do you make them? So how, essentially, what is your take on how you would double this tax? What do you come with in order to avoid this brain drain?
I guess it is up to every country to create the social incentives to just for young and talented people to stay. For example, in the UK, once you have received your education, there are a lot of opportunities, like we learned in the opposing team. And despite the high level of tax, you're inclined to stay at least for a while to explore these opportunities, which you wouldn't have if you move to Russia side.
Well, essentially, what you're saying, if the country is bad, obviously, the higher taxes will push people out. If the country is good, higher taxes might not. So it's not an unavoidable situation. Right. A good country actually can mean I can afford to levy high taxes in order to maintain.
I'll add something to this. Why do you think progressive taxation would cause more rate?
See, this is just an argument. I wasn't taking my own opinion, but it definitely come up in the conversation. It's definitely being used as an argument.
Yes, okay, I see that. I just want to add, I don't think progressive taxation is that strong on brain drain. I don't think the really talented people are the ones that earn that much that they would be severely sick by progressive tax. Do you actually think that the people that earn the ridiculous amounts and really affected by progressive taxation are the real brain drain you're talking about?
Right. So the argument that I was thinking is based on more or less statistical data, in the sense that you see people living in some countries because they have high taxation rates, but that goes hand in hand with what he was saying.
What my argument is,
that doesn't reapply at the same level across all countries, especially for good countries. Like you don't see the same level of brain drain from the UK that has a progressive system to what we have, for instance, in Romania. We had a progressive taxation system.
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I know. That's what you're saying.
So you should just didn't say that.
So basically everybody agrees.
Yes, he does.
Can we hear something from the opposition?
No, just we can get them to just
I'm really confused why it's a difficult concept. The progressive taxation causes brain drain. I mean, obviously, why else would you go and live in Dubai? Like, why else would McKinsey & Company and all the banks really go to Dubai? Because tax here, there's nothing there. It's a desert.
If I may interject, I think what George is trying to say is, for example, if your progressive tax system is 1%, 5%, 10% for like the richest, there's no reason why you would leave. And it's still a progressive tax system. Progressive tax does not mean high tax.
Sure, fine. In that sense, I agree, but then it completely doesn't address the quality. So if you tax the rich like 3% instead of the poor, you tax I mean, then you fail to achieve your objective with yourselves.
I think that addressed my question in some respect. So it's obvious that this happened, and my question was how unavoidable this is, and if it's really related just to progressive taxation. So I'll challenge everyone to deny that there exists some relation of causality between the two. There obviously exists, but is that everything there is to it? And I think
Okay, what I want to reply to your position is that what I think John referred to when he meant brain drain. Obviously, coming on answering as well. What I suppose he means, and so obviously I'm not committed to most of that issue, is, for example, people that go from Romania and Bulgaria to work in the UK. Is that type of very clever people, talented people that go from Romania and Bulgaria to work in the UK? Is that type of brain you're talking about?
That's brain drain.
I think I don't like progressive taxation has very, very little to do with the decision between countries. This class of people, the talented people is talking about. I would say that the kind of people that progressive taxation really have an impact on, in terms of drain, let's say, are the ones that get a lot higher wages that most talented people is referring to actually get.
Okay, then that gets me to my next question. Is that not the point of progressive system, though, to tax them, to tax the richest more so they can contribute?
Could you keep your point from here?
But I think that the problem is twofold. On the one hand, you have people brain draining from poor countries into richer countries. Once you are inside of this sphere of the Western world, you could have people brain draining because of tax reasons, because the standard of life otherwise remains kind of the same. So countries like Western Europe, America will lose people one to another because of that.
Before we carry on with this argument,
Just
I think Jojo wants to say some more things afterwards, but if anybody else has any questions, feel free to take the microphone from him. Yeah.
I think there are that many people that go between these countries on a similar level because of the different tax systems. And this class of people.
Also, let's not forget the US does have a progressive tax system.
Yeah, but look, obviously not as many, but that is a very different matter entirely. You never want talent to leave your country, no matter how many people leave it.
So yeah, I mean, I got my answer quite early on in the discussion. I mean, we can wait till more people feel like it. But then that gets me to, of course, impact higher earners, right? We discussed income progressive. If they are the ones who drain away, is that not a point? Like, does that not defeat the point of the progressive tax? And how would you really? I mean, how would you argue that is the effect, while being not singular, so not single cause is behind brain drain? Progressive tax in this system, where the most important part of brain drain is the cost. The brain drain at a very high level of talent, whatever that means, is due to progressive tax when all things are taken together.
You mean brain drain at the highest level of talent, or brain drain at the highest level of income?
See, that's what I meant by whatever that means.
Because I don't think they're the same thing.
Of course they're not, but I'm saying
I don't think you can define brain drain for income. It's brain, it's about talent, it's not about
Don't you
income.
need brain to have income?
that is a fundamental assumption is that you need brain.
I don't think it's so. I don't think that's always the case. That's what I'm saying. I don't
The
think.
failure of that model is not, I mean, of course, there are lots of dumb people who go work money and companies down the board.
No. I mean, brain drain, I think, refers to people who finish sort of like higher studies, university, and then choose to leave the country to go to a different country. That's brain drain.
But then
It's not 50-year-old people with loads of money.
I think brain drain is the outflux of talented people at any age.
Yeah.
And the other thing which we're discussing is capital drain, where you scare rich individuals or corporations from investing in your country because of high tax. I think these are two different things that they should be addressed differently.
Right.
I mean, one question with that is not even a question, just a statement. If progressive taxation really stimulates brain drain, why in in Bulgaria and Romania, where I'm not sure about Romania, but in Bulgaria we have flat tax. Why do people still leave? Isn't this the biggest, or is this an exception? And
It's really a question for us.
yes,
Yeah, well, again, maybe for the third time in this debate, if there is a correlation, doesn't necessarily mean that.
I know that they might be statistician, and I know that's an important question, but I think that it is a process, although it's not causality, but I think they can.
But the reality is that in Bulgaria and Romania, the average salary is 300 euros. So, okay, fine. But there are other factors other than the percentage that the government takes. So what I'm saying is that given how crowded it is in Bulgaria already, if you go into 50% on like 1,000 euros or 1,500 euros, which would be a high salary in Bulgaria and Romania, then I don't know what we're talking about in terms of people staying there. They're already leaving because the salaries are kind of, because in England, even with 50%, you get paid more than with 20% in Bulgaria and Romania, and that's a completely different problem, which has nothing to do with the taxation system. It's to do with the state of the economy and the business there is there. So
I have another question that is not really related to that, but it's for, it is related to the topic, but not to this point. It's a different
Could I
point.
ask for clarification on your point? Might break away a bit from partiality, but I mean, you just said that what remains after your tax is a bit more important rather than the tax level itself.
I mean, that is important as well.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear that that's what you meant.
Of course, like, but there are two, the feeling that you have for the money that you get left changes. So it's important that, when you start, like, it's different when you start working, just when you start working and you understand that, okay, you have that much money left, that amount of money left, and you know, that's, okay, you live in the world, we can talk about how well.
No, I wasn't asking about like how it feels or anything. I just want to make sure you know.
But yeah, of course, I agree. I mean, if there is a, you know, how you feel about the money you do that way. That's not an issue with how you feel about the rest of it and how it's spent.
Yeah, no, that's completely different. Sorry.
That's okay. I was thinking of one aspect that probably didn't cover. How do you think of both sides really, of taxation within projects or within places like the European Union, where you have really easy mobility of people, mobility of businesses around? Should we have more uniformity of tax systems within the whole European Union? And does the concept of what taxation is need to be changed on a larger scale outside of a country in order to give equal chance to people? Because you could talk about whether progressive taxation is good or bad, depending on whether it affects a Western economy or a highly developed economy, or whether it develops, or whether it affects a very poor country within the geographical region, which is European Union. So I think the concept of both changes as you move from one level of economy to another, and that's something that needs to be, it's almost a separate level that needs to be addressed in this same debate here. I don't know if any of you have any thoughts on that.
Well, first, I mean, the reality is that even the European Union is not isolated, so it's not good enough to just go on the European Union level. If you want to progress with such a way, you have to get your 196 countries, okay, because otherwise it's going to be dominant and you have to vote. And I don't think that's possible at this stage of society yet. In terms of course, the analysis changes when you go to higher levels. And then the European Union, the reality is that, yes, there is a welfare state, if that's sustainable, and that's good in many countries like France and Germany, where rates of taxation are higher than in England. A lot of people still live very well. The question is, how long is that going to last? Because we're seeing that the European Union in a way that you continue with that increased amount of progressive taxation, and the reality is something that wealthiest people in those societies is doing very well for the wealthiest, but the reality is that in all those countries, in London you can't live in Mayfair in the South Kensington, in France you can't go to Courchevel, you can't go to Champagne, these things are because you get taxed, and in Cold War era it worked, because the competition was different, the size was different, you didn't have such a, European Union was not effectively half the world, that was fought out by Crimea and Clinton. Now you have very great competition, you have very wealthy people that didn't before. I mean, of course, there were always incredibly wealthy people, but now we're just in the rise of different countries in Asia, big other big economies, and also just the rise of the resources. So countries like Qatar, that was not really a country. It was a desert with sort of a tribesmen living there, which then became a phenomenally rich uh, part of the world with enjoying quite vast, vast wealth in the Western world. And that's something that's what's causing this great problem and insecurity in European societies because you have to compete with all of that as well. And everybody effectively wants to live in Europe,
But
in
then,
one way or another, because that's the most, that here you can balance, even the weather and culture and opportunities and traditionally, historically, it's always been where civilization erupted. In its
but is
historical
there,
eyes.
And I just want to obviously leave them for our debate.
Yeah, so I was gonna try
I
and
just wanted to, I just
get more
wanted to,
substantive arguments.
I just wanted to say that the point of the debate is not whether we should hinder the able to make a lot of money. It is how we should tax so that we achieve some level of fairness and some level of society. I mean, I don't have anything against people who earn a lot of money to earn even more. They can do it, then fair enough. It's just that they should give back some of that back to society through taxation.
But why by tax?
Why
Why
not?
should they give back to the state?
Because that's an effective way of doing it,
It's
and
not.
that's controlled by the state.
But it's controlled by the state, that's what I'm saying, it's not an effective way of doing it, because you have no control of how you're gonna do it. You have to go and look at the sponsor of tax benefits when you donate and you serve to them.
There are tax benefits when you donate.
Yeah, exactly, so I'm saying, but why are we even forcing, I mean, you have to create a society where people want to give to things that they want to give. Not, and you're addressing, I mean, if we're talking about values, you're addressing this simply by forcing, and you can't, by forcing, because by forcing them to redistribute in a way that they don't want it to be redistributed. And all those benefits, or, avoiding this and, spending something, giving donations instead of taxation, they're limited. You cannot give all your tax in donation. I cannot donate my income. I would gladly donate my income tax to Cambridge or to cancer research or to something that I believe in, but I can't. I have to give it to the government of Britain to redistribute in various ways, including in finding creative ways of getting rid of Bulgarians and Romanians, because I'm also paying for border control in this country. So effectively, I don't agree with that. I don't want to pay for that, and I don't want to work for that every other day of my life.
Make
I
like
don't have to, if you don't want to.
I just want to make a point to that. While I agree that the government often spends money completely wrong way, and it can't be responsible for that. But I did half an hour ago, so. No, I agree with that. But I think that giving all the freedom to each individual to choose how they distribute their tax money, rather than paying the flat tax, but just paying the tax to the government. I think the risk of that is that it's very good that you donate to cancer research. I would donate to that myself, but I'm not sure everyone would. And what if no one in the country would think that it's worth to show that money to infrastructure? We'll just have the roads in the country. What if they think?
Well, it's not the same as progressive.
It's not the same progressivization. I was making a point about what you said about shouldn't pay tax to the government, you should have to do it.
Yeah,
So I think well, it's true that the government doesn't always invest it in the right way. I think it shouldn't be that each citizen pays all the money by the nation.
but it's not either black or white. It doesn't have to be.
guys, if I can interject, the debate isn't about like whether or not the government uses the tax effectively. Because I think we can all find things we don't agree. Like, I don't think any one individual in the UK will be happy with how the government spends that, which is why we should move away from this point and try and advance.
But it is
progressive
related,
tax.
it is related to progressive tax because there is.
It's not, because you would still pay tax in a flat tax rate system,
You-
and you'd still be
you-
unhappy with how the government uses your money.
Yes.
Not necessarily.
Well,
Your
for
flat
some-
tax
for
of
some-
20% might turn into progressive tax of 20%.
I see the argument. So
I really want to stress that progressive tax does not mean higher tax and flat tax does not mean lower tax. It could be the other way around.
Well, yeah, hypothetically, yeah, you're right, no.
depends how you
I'm sure I could find a country that has a flat tax rate higher than some country with a progressive tax rate. And then I just,
If you have a price, then maybe yes, you can, but in the vast majority of cases, it's not the case.
Okay, if I can move, all I wanted initially was to point out for Propar that there is really, what was maybe can mitigated, there are all sorts of qualifiers. There's really an issue about brain drain for and qualifiers as capital, right? We're associated with progressive tax, assuming the level of taxation, flat tax, would be the same as the middle bracket in a progressive taxation system. Make my mathematical point very clear, right? Okay, I want to move now into point out, this is a statement, it's not a question. Questions afterwards. For the opposition, they at one point during the debate, capitalism was used as some form of argument for the validity or the invalidity of the progressive tax in this context. So it's like, what does capitalism want us to do? I don't really care. That no one should say that capitalism is the best solution, as no one says communism is. That such a thing is not a valid argument. Of course, we can debate capitalism, but that, so I'll move on. Right, about fairness, equality and fairness. This is quite a clear, quite unclear concept. If some say progressive tax will do better, the others are saying really not. Because while you somehow produce some form of equality, unsure what it is, you are being unfair to the rich people. So it's becoming clear to me that equality and fairness are not really something you can really come to peace with in terms of it. One question that I have, and this is for the opposition, is how exactly is an imperfect benefit system used as a contrast with progressive tax? What is the causality of any way? Regardless of the taxation system, you can still have a very bad, unfair, easy to exploit, whatever you want, tax benefit systems. How is that really an argument against progressive tax? That might be maybe an argument against taxation as a concept. Why should I pay taxes for the poor? But how is it against the idea of progressive tax? I want to see
Misunderstood the argument here, not that the argument is not that there are loopholes in the tax, in the progressive tax system. Then it's that because of the economies of scale of the wealthiest part of the population, we have a greater ability to exploit the taxation. Progressive tax, in its vast majority, is income tax, currently in every country. Income tax, you have very little control over in terms of loopholes and what you can do with it. There is very little creativity. You work in a country, you get taxed by that country according to the rules of that country. It doesn't matter what your citizenship. Right. And it doesn't matter what anything else. The reason why I'm saying, and the argument was against progressive taxation, has to do with the objective we're setting. The objective we're setting was creating for society. Progressive taxation is not achieving that because it's failing to capture.
Right, I understand. Of course, I agree with that point, but I fail to see how benefits play into all this. Why they were mentioned? They explicitly mentioned our say social benefits, like unemployment benefits and all that, were mentioned as something you somehow a society that uses progressive tax would have that is somehow different from a society that has flat tax. But I'm not entirely sure how benefits play into this. Maybe it was just it.
I'm a bit lost in
So it was one of your capital arguments that progressive tax system with progressive taxation, essentially you are paying for the poor, right?
Well, the reality is that in effect, what I was trying to say there is that progressive taxation usually needs greater tax rather than lesser tax. So the economies which have progressive taxation, because the majority of tax comes from income tax in this country as well as most other countries. The reality is that in such countries with progressive tax, you have more tax in absolute values. So
that is
more
the
tax
point. You get more money from the very rich.
Exactly, but then of course you spend more money on benefits. And that's what I was getting at.
Not
Exactly, but I think not necessarily. See, that's what I want to try to.
But there is reality. I mean, theoretically you're right. Yes, there is a way of. I'm arguing here a lot about the reality and practicality and what actually happens. And what actually happens is that I think that I'm not sure we're sort of accepting, or I think in this debate, not all of us, including myself, try to find ways of, getting more tax. And again, I think we can all fail to address the possibility that there is already too much tax. And I think that that's to do with that.
But I'm going to clarify my question. So the second one was, at one point we mentioned that the system, we mentioned this, I'm not going to commit a fast accusing this of being best up, just you made a point that progressive tax does not mean that a tax needs to be paid by the state. So you can have a progressive tax as an idea, as in the sense. Progressive, after a certain amount, a certain threshold, you have to pay this % of your income. That is progressive tax. You can agree on that. How you collect that is a completely different matter. It can be that out of that, actually, the flat part is actually collected straight from the state, by the state, and the rest is, so you're still forced, it's still a tax. You can't decide, I want to donate, it's still a tax, but you are then presented with a choice of how you would want to spend that. That's the progressive tax. So how does the argument of the state not doing useful stuff with my extra money that they're taxing me support this situation? Which is what we increasingly see nowadays.
Well, in that case, wouldn't we also be entering the problem that was mentioned earlier with people deciding where their money goes, so the total wealth will not be distributed fairly as the government would have done so?
So I think like one of the examples Georgia had in mind was the way we have Romania where 2% of your income tax, you can choose to distribute it to a non-governmental organization of your choice.
And that could be, say, if you have your income like this, it's not only 2%, like 15%, something like that. So in definition, if you step back and look at it, it's a progressive tax. So it's tax and still falls in our debate. But it's an example of how the tax is still progressive and it is being used by us.
Fine, but that doesn't solve the point. You're still going to keep the middle class and the rich. You fail to capture the majority capital.
Okay, so that's a completely different argument, but yeah, so I see that as has no implication, essentially. So what I meant was, what I was writing down is the state who uses the money does not have a direct bearing on the type of the tax. You can have equal a flat tax and versus progressive tax in a bad state, it's the case with our country, and you're still prone to problems. But yeah, that's the point I was going to agree on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could we pass the microphone to the other members of the audience? I think they had some questions. Maybe they seem
Some comments, not questions, not necessarily comments.
they seem
You basically mentioned the key ones that would like to take the benefits or bad economies. Nothing here to see.
should we close the debate? If each member of the team want to say one short sentence, making the main point of their debate before we take a vote and the debate. Just the short sort of summary. Yeah, starting with the
Okay, the summary, in my view,
one sentence.
inequality can be reduced by progressive tax, but it has to apply to both income and household.
Thank you.
Should
Yeah, sure. Well, you gotta
one premise.
Progressive taxation sounds nice in theory, but in practice it will be always undermined by other factors.
Progressive taxation is being demonstrated towards in many states successively in the past half century.
Taxation economy should not be born by those who work the hardest. And those who are beyond working, their price capital cannot be captured by progressive taxation. And that's why it is felt over the past years.
Yeah. Very much. We could have a vote. Who is for the motion?
Do we?
Oh, we can infer that obviously each of the schemes would be for their.
Obviously not. If we should manage to convince somebody to give both schemes, then they will do support us.
So who's for progressive taxation?
Yeah, who is for progressive taxation? Okay, only 3 members. And who is against?
I have to, count them all.
Yeah, so it seems against progressive taxation norms. All right, thank you very much.